So as we get closer to the draft and free agency, we move past the point to where we're really evaluating the job, the tremendous job, admittedly, that Kevin Stefanski did in his first year, and now start to turn and look at the job that Andrew Berry did, not only for last offseason, but more importantly, to see or predict or see what we should expect at least for next offseason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the rookie class, look at who played enough snaps to really qualify for a grade, and we're going to evaluate those guys. So let's talk about that. But before I get into that, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the content coming up. We're going to have a ton of stuff as always, so make sure you're subscribed and notified to make sure you don't miss anything. And also, shout out to the patreon.com dog check tier members. And as always, I start with Michael Matique, Rob Farron, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, David Roth, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Keith Gerkak, Brad Calbo, Daylon W, James McGinty, Arenda Hall, Rex Kaufman, Chad Gimme, David Molinado, Andrew Sadejo, Dylan Hill, Josh Bendor, Eric Green, Jaleel Salim Jr., Martha Krusna, Mark M, TJ Showman, Stuart Moore, Bobo Regretti, Anthony O, David Arndt, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, John Cummings, Andrew Hirsch, Hundo Magnifico, Paul Wilcox, Curtis Bayer, Batman, Rush Sharir, Barack Kumar, John Alver, Beerman 069, Masayua, Buds of Roland, James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcoxon, Marie Vivert, CK, Keith Anderson, Sean Barron, Gakus Pisano, Dom Guzzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Anthony Latham, Christian, Matt Bond, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Soul Train, Charles Work, Billy, Michael Holden Acton, Moose Gentry, Patrick F. Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Swift, IT Rex, Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Jesus Serrano, Chris Fones, Picktown Brown Backers, Baker is a GOAT, Matt Lloyd, Mark Kahn, Max Out Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining that Patreon. Again, it means a ton that you guys do what you do there. Now, let's evaluate this rookie class. So the first thing when I was thinking about evaluating any of the rookies is that I felt like it would be only fair to evaluate rookies who played more than 300 snaps. So that means Nick Harris, not going to get a grade. Jacob Phillips, under 300 snaps, not going to get a grade. Grant Delpit, no snaps, not going to get a grade. I don't think it's possible to grade them in any way that would be remotely fair when they have not played over 300 snaps in the NFL. I just didn't think it would be fair. But the people who will be graded, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Jordan Elliott, Harrison Bryant, and Jedrick Wills. Well, let's get to them. We're going to start with Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I think Donovan Peoples-Jones was an interesting choice because he was kind of a throwaway pick at the end of the 6th round here. One of the last receivers selected. I believe he was a 26th receiver selected in a class of like 30 wide receivers that were drafted. He's 6'2", 208. He adds a lot of size and athleticism to this Browns offense that needs it. And when we talk about what he did in his rookie year, well, he was the 12th ranked rookie wide receiver. And again, for a guy drafted in the 6th round, that is tremendous. That ranks higher than guys like Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Reagor, Michael Pittman Jr., David Duvernay, Henry Ruggs. You know, these are guys who are 1, 2, 3, 7th, and 14th when it comes to wide receivers off the board. Donovan Peoples-Jones was 26 off the board, but yet ended up being the 12th best wide receiver in the draft class. And again, and then when you look at the wide receivers that ended up being ahead of him as far as rookie rankings go, there's only one that was selected or signed after him, and that's Marquez Callaway, who was an undrafted free agent. Everybody else was way ahead when it comes to getting drafted on Donovan Peoples-Jones. So comparatively to this rookie class here, I think the Browns did a bang-up job getting a wide receiver in the 6th round, considering that not just that this class was deep. Yes, the class was deep, but there were a lot of misses, or at least first year. Like, nobody's a bust yet, right? But there were a lot of guys who did not perform up to standard that got drafted in that 1st round that were wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Reagor, again, guys who did not put up the strongest years. Henry Ruggs, right? These guys were supposed to kind of set the world on fire rookie year. They did not. Donovan Peoples-Jones, according to Pro Football Focus, ranked higher than those guys, which is significant. Now, he did not do a ton, right? 14 reps, 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he was impactful. He was able to add something when Odell wasn't out there, caught that game-winning touchdown in Cincinnati. I like his athleticism. I like his size. I like his ability as a punt returner. I just feel like he needs a little bit more polish when it comes to situational football, when it comes to like when you're going to call a fair catch or when you're going to run up to take a punt, when you're going to try to make a play. I wish he would be more tactful, and I think he will be more tactful as he becomes a older and more wise player. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, 76th best receiver in the NFL this year, 26th selected, but 12th best in his draft class. You have to give that draft selection a B+. It would be an A+ if he gave you like crazy production, but it's a B+ because you got really good production out of a guy that you did not even know for a fact was going to make your roster when you selected him, because you just really didn't have the need there at wide receiver. But he found a way to get some playing time, played well, and now he's a bright spot, right? Now he's somebody who you're not going to really develop into a number 1 receiver, but he could be a valuable 2 or even like a 3 in some situations. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, 6th-round pick, that's a good marker for Andrew Berry. So far, it appears, in his first year. Now let's talk about Jordan Elliott. Jordan Elliott. Now, it's surprising, right, that he played as many snaps as he has, because we have just not talked about Jordan Elliott, and he hasn't had a great rookie year. He had a 55 Pro Football Focus grade, which isn't great. He had 12 tackles, 1 forced fumble, was ranked in 9th out of all 13 eligible defensive linemen that were selected, and he was the 7th selected defensive lineman. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, who well outperformed that kind of a metric, right, where you're selected versus where you ranked metric. Jordan Elliott did not outperform it, and he just had some issues that I felt like were predictable seeing him out of Mizzou. In Mizzou, part of his issues was his strength. He was not strong enough to kind of get off of blocks at times. That was definitely a problem this year in the NFL. And I think that's going to be a problem probably next year till the year after that. It takes about 3 years for somebody to develop into having that kind of NFL strength. That's why you see with offensive linemen a lot of the times, it takes 3 years for them to truly get to where they're going to be for the rest of their career as offensive linemen, because for most people, it takes about 3 years to kind of get adjusted to being as strong as you need to be to play football in the NFL. So Jordan's going to take a little while to develop. That's fine. As far as what grade I would give this draft pick, I wasn't a huge fan of it when it happened. And I see the need for a defensive lineman. I just disagree with how they were filling that need. And with Jordan Elliott, I felt like they got more of a pass rushing defensive lineman than a run stuffer, which is really what I think this defensive line could use. So I did not, or was not in love with this pick at the time. I'm still not really sold on it. So I'm going to sit with the same grade I gave it on draft day. I think I'm going to give this a C. I'm not overly sure about it. There's some metrics that say Jordan Elliott's going to develop into a great player. We'll see. This is obviously a long-term investment for the Cleveland Browns, something they hope to pan out in year 2, 3, and 4 instead of year 1. But year 1 was, relatively unremarkable for Jordan Elliott. Now let's talk about Harrison Bryant. Harrison Bryant, there's not a ton to compare him against. There's only like 3 tight ends that got enough snaps to be eligible to be ranked in Pro Football Focus. So he was 2 out of 3. He was the 2nd tight end drafted in this NFL draft. 3 touchdowns, 288 or 283 yards. And the production there is fine for what he was like the 3rd tight end for most of the season. The issue that he had, right, was the drops, 2 drops, and then the 2 forced fumbles. Those are just, when you're getting probably 15 targets in a season, you can't have 4 of those targets result in either drops or a turnover. So that ended up being a non-starter. Now, to his credit, 3 of those were touchdowns. So I do think there's a ton of potential there. And this is a guy who signed and showed a ton of potential in training camp. the season got started. After that Cincinnati game, you felt like he was about to burst onto the scene. And I think the coaching staff felt the same way about him. He seems like a guy who plays really well in practice, looked like he was putting it together in NFL games. And at the end of the season, kind of fell off the rails for him a little bit. He kind of hit that rookie wall, had a couple of forced fumbles happen to him in the exact same way. Was really infuriating when it happened, and you saw him kind of hit that much maligned rookie wall where he just could not get much better than how he had played in like the middle portion of the season. Now, part of this was because a lot of weird stuff happened at the end of the season. He was playing slot receiver at one point against the Jets, so I'm going to be a little lenient on him. And I was pretty tough on him when I did my roster grades because I did mark him as somebody who I think kind of disappointed the expectation because he set the bar so high for how well he performed in training camp. You thought that he would be the number 2 tight end ready because that's what he did in camp, right? He dominated David Njoku and pretty much took that second tight end role from David Njoku, who had been in the league for a few years at that point. But as the season went on, David Njoku reestablished that he was the number 2 tight end and kind of shored up some things that had been issues for him as far as consistency and blocking goes with David Njoku. So you got to give credit to David for developing and just getting flat better throughout the season. But all in all, with Harrison Bryant, look, I see the potential, and I think there is tremendous potential with him there. I think in 2-3 years, he'll probably be the best tight end on this team. You won't have a need for Austin Hooper, and he can be one of your primary targets, or he could be a permanent number 2. I don't know what the future is, but I know that there is a bright future for Harrison Bryant. So with that being said, right, I'm going to give him the same grade as Jordan Elliott, but this is a much different grade. I'm going to give him a C+. I'm going to give him a little bit more than Jordan Elliott because with Jordan Elliott, I just haven't seen the potential yet. With Harrison Bryant, you see the light. You're just not sure which direction he's going to track in that way. So the potential's there. He has it. He just has some things he needs to clean up, and you would hope that he has a better year to kind of back up how well he did play in training camp at the beginning of his NFL career. So you want to look at that, but also be mindful of how he ended the season, not in the greatest way, and that's why I'm going to give Harrison Bryant the C+. Now let's talk about the first-round pick, Jedrick Wills. Now, when you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, it's going to be tough with Jedrick, right? Because he ranks 6 out of 9 offensive tackles that were selected. But if you look at his pass blocking grade, he was the second best pass blocking offensive lineman in not in football, but in his draft class. And I think there are some issues there with Jedrick, but nothing that I'm really concerned about. Again, with offensive linemen, strength usually is an issue for young offensive linemen. It looks like strength's an issue with him, especially in the run game. In the pass game, it doesn't because he has such great technique that he's able to overcome some of the strength issues that he has had. But that's just not apparent in the run game. The run game, he just doesn't look as comfortable. And a lot of it is because this is different than what he did in Alabama. And also, he's playing a different side than he did in Alabama. And that's going to take a few years to get used to, taking those reps a different way, being able to get power off the different legs and bases that he has to, and being able to run the different run schemes that the Browns do that they didn't do in Alabama. When he's pass blocking, he knows everything. He's very comfortable in that. So once he gets comfortable run blocking, I feel like he's going to be a much better run blocker. But I do always feel like he's a guy who is not Joe Thomas, but similar in the strengths and weaknesses that Joe Thomas had, where Joe Thomas' strength was pass blocking. He was a really good run blocker, but not as good as a run blocker as he was a pass blocker. I think that's a similar thing with Jedrick. His biggest issue all year was consistency. I think once he gets more strength, I think you're going to see a lot of the consistency stuff kind of go away with Jedrick because, again, I think a lot of his inconsistency issues, a lot of his penalties had to do with him kind of trying to overcompensate for not being just flat strong enough to be able to handle things. And again, that's usual with young line of scrimmage players that they're not strong enough coming out of college. It's kind of a strength and conditioning, technique thing. Also, it's just a growth, a genetic thing, right? Some people just don't get into their full grown man bodies until they're in their mid to late 20s. So that's where Jedrick's at. I'm still going to give this grade a B. And that's because Jedrick was really good as a pass blocker. And this offensive line is good enough and continues to be good enough that they can help him develop in those areas where he is weak. You see, he was weak in run blocking, but they were good enough to still be the best run blocking offensive line with him struggling in that area. So I feel like there's going to be a ton of room to grow with Jedrick. I feel like in those areas he has good enough support, and I don't really see any red flags. You just wish there would be more consistency. But again, when you're talking about offensive tackles in their first 3 years in the NFL, you're not going to get the best play of their career. That comes later in their career. So Jedrick, I'm fine with. I like the pick still. I would give it a B. So that's my grades. Well, regrades for Andrew Berry's first draft. Let's see what he does this year. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What grades would you give these rookies? Let me know. I would love to hear it. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.